Hi there, my name's Bruce Rain from Brankus Creations, and in this video we'll be assembling and setting up an external DB25 BlueSCSI. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and I promise all of your dreams will come true. Well, maybe not all of them, but at least the ones where you're dreaming about subscribing to my channel. This is the original BlueSCSI, a SCSI hard drive emulator that allows you to use an SD card in place of an old SCSI hard drive. As you can see, it has the 50-pin connector that allows you to plug it into a ribbon cable and use it as an internal drive. This is the DB25 BlueSCSI. It still uses the same Blue Pill development board and firmware, but it's a much more compact design and uses a DB25 connector for plugging it into a Mac's external SCSI port. It's designed to be the last device in the SCSI chain, so its termination is permanently on. You could theoretically remove these resistors to disable termination, but under most use cases, having it permanently terminated should be fine. It doesn't have any additional power connector, as it should be able to get all of the power it needs from the SCSI bus. The one exception to this is the Mac Plus, which does require a modification to provide termination power. If you have a few vintage Macs, this is an incredibly useful little tool to have. Back in the 90s, when I did a bit of Mac tech support, I used to carry one of these around with me. A 500 megabyte external hard drive, and it was loaded up with every system installer, drive formatter, utility and diagnostics tool. I would plug it into the customer's computer, boot from the external drive, and then run diagnostics on the internal drive. There was also a bit of spare space on the drive so I could back up the customer's data if needed, keeping in mind that most of them were only using 40 or 80 megabyte drives at the time. So now we can replace this with this. And if you use an emulator such as SheepShaver or Basilisk, you can easily transfer data from a modern computer onto the BlueSCSI drive image. So let's get building. If you bought your BlueSCSI from me already assembled, you will have received this, and you can skip this assembly section and go straight to the setup. If you bought your BlueSCSI as a kit, you will have received this. I will be demonstrating how to solder the SD card slot onto the board. However, if you buy this from me, this will already be done. If you're planning to buy all the components yourself and build it yourself, just keep in mind that not all of these DB25 connectors are made the same. This one here is a cheap one, and if I remove these little lugs, you'll see that these are what's holding this shielding on. And these lugs have to be removed if you want to use this as an external SCSI device. So try and get hold of one like this, which has that shielding actually fused to the body of it so that it can't come off if you remove these lugs. So it's just an important tip there. If you buy it from me, you will get the right sort of connector. So I'm going to start with the little SD card slot. As this is surface mount soldering, I will be using lots of flux. This will greatly assist in any sort of surface mount soldering that you do. So I'm going to put a really decent amount of flux onto all these pads. Then we're going to plonk this down in position. And we will start our soldering. So I'm going to get a little bit of solder onto the end of my iron tip. I'm going to hold this in position. And I'm going to, sorry, it's so small it moves around really easily. And I'm going to just solder this side first. So just get some heat there, and there we go. That corner is now soldered. Now we're going to do this corner. Again, get a little bit more solder on here. And there we go. Resist the temptation to come at it from this angle, because if you do that, you are likely to get some solder inside the slot, which will actually block the card from going in. So you want to just make sure your solder is only going on the outside of this connector here. Right, and we've got a couple more little spots here we need to solder. We've got this one here, and this one here, this one here. Just be careful when you're doing this one here that's right next to this hole here. Make sure you don't accidentally bridge solder across from that onto this pin here, or this little hole there. And then for soldering these little pins here, we just get a little bit of solder on the tip there, and we just work our way across. Soldering each one. Once again, being very careful not to get any solder into the corners of the slot, and of course being very careful not to do what I just did there, which is bridge between the two pins. So here we go. Okay, so that card slot is now in place. So we can move on to the rest of the assembly. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put on this diode. There's just the one diode. It goes on this side here. As you can see the little outline there, and we've got a little line on the diode, and that needs to match up with a little line on the screen printing there. So I'm going to bend this, and it's pretty tight, so I tend to push these pins right down so that they're really close there, and then put it through the hole. Give it a yank from the other side. Might even grab some pliers to help me with this. There we go. Okay, so that's in there. Just give these a little bend, and then just going to solder these in place. Okay, now we just need to snip off the excess. Right, now the card slot and the diode go on this side of the board, everything else goes on this side. My recommendation is the first thing to put on is the actual blue pill, and the reason for that is it's a very snug fit here, and so it's easy to actually put the resistors in place once you have the blue pill in place. So we'll get these little guys and we will put those in with the long pins facing downwards like that. I'm just going to lay them flat down here like that, and we will just solder a couple of pins in. That'll do. Okay, that'll just hold it in position for the moment. And when you're putting the blue pill onto the base, you need to make sure that the USB slot is on the same side as the SD card slot. So we're just going to line those up there, and we'll pop that down, and then we can start soldering all of these pins on the top here. Okay, so now we can finish soldering the rest of the pins on the other side. I'm going to use this clamp to just hold the board a little bit still so it's not rocking all over the place while I'm soldering it. And now we have to snip all of these pins off. They're a little bit on the long side, and they will hinder its ability to fit into the little case. So I'm just going to grab my side cutters and cut them all short. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is put in the little resistor nets, and we have two different types here. We have the 22 or the 220 and the 330. So there's the 33, and there's a 33, and there's the other 22. The board actually has them labelled here. The 33s are the ones along the top here, and the 22s along the bottom. And you can see there's a little outline around here, and that's showing pin 1, which is the one with the dot on the resistor itself. So for the 33, we're going to put that there like that, and there's another 33 there like that. So the dots on the left hand side. If you have built one of the original BlueSCSIs, you'll notice that the dots are face outwards of each other, but on this new design the dots are both on the left hand side. So now we get the 22, pop that in there. Okay, as you can see, it's a pretty snug fit up against the blue pill here. And now we're going to solder those in place. What I will do with these is I'll get a little bit of flux here, and I'll just create a couple of little temporary solders to hold those in place. Just getting some solder on the end of my tip, and the flux is helping that transfer across onto the pin. There we go. So they're all soldered on there now. I'd like to ideally get them a little bit neater in there so they don't look all unsightly. So there we go. And now we can just solder those in. And we'll just grab our little clamp again. Okay, and that's it for the resistors. Last of all is the DB25 connector. We just have to try and line up these little pins with the holes, which is a lot trickier than it seems. There we go, got it. Okay, so make sure that's nice and flush, and then we'll start soldering those in. And that is it. I will get a little bit of flux cleaner here and just clean some of that off so it doesn't look quite as ugly. And here is the finished BlueSCSI. Now all we have to do is put it inside the case. And this case is very easy to open. You just need to give it a bit of a pull from there. And then you can just slide this in one side first. Just lift that up a little bit so that it gets past it, and then just press it down firmly until it clicks into the case and is flat. There we go. It's nice and flat, and then the lid just needs to slot in there, like at an angle. You can see there's an angle there, so it just slots in underneath, and then press it down, and that's it. You're good to go. Now we can just go in and start setting up the software for it. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is we need to format the SD card being used in the BlueSCSI. I have mounted it on the desktop here. I'm now going to launch Disk Utility and select the card, and then we are going to erase it. We will have that as master boot record. We will have that on exFAT, and then we will just call this BlueSCSI. And erase. Okay, so that's it. That card is now ready to go. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to get the operating system all ready to go. I'm going to be setting this up with system 7.5. I'm going to need to run an emulator on this. The emulator I will be using will be SheepShaver. First thing we need to do is we need to visit BlueSCSI. So that's scsi.blue is the URL. Then you want to scroll right down to the bottom and click on the GitHub link. And then we can go down here to usage. And then we will find here a section for blank images. So we can click on that and we will download, just click on the download button there. We'll download all of these pre-formatted disk images for use on the BlueSCSI. They're just blank, but they are formatted. Okay, so here are my disk images, and I'm going to grab a 2 GB one here. So I'll just expand that. And there's my blank disk image all ready to go. So now we've just got to put an operating system on it. So the next thing we need to do is we need to get hold of SheepShaver. And you will find that on the Emaculation website. There are links in the description. We'll go down here to SheepShaver for Mac OS X. And then we will go here to version 2.5 here for the Mac, downloading that one. Okay, now I've downloaded SheepShaver. If I try and launch that, it will just immediately quit. Actually, let me just open it up. Now it will just immediately quit. We need to go to this redundant robot website and we need to download a Macintosh ROM. We're going to select here the old world 4 MB ROM. Just download that. Okay, I have downloaded that Mac old world ROM, but it can't be called that in order for us to use it. It has to be called Mac OS ROM. Now you can see it launches into a flashing question mark. Most importantly, now I can actually select the preferences. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the hard drive image that I've got here. That's it there. I'm going to go in and select that. And that is going to be my main hard drive. Now what I also need to do is get hold of my System 7.5 installer. And for that, we're going to need good old Macintosh Garden. Here we are at System 7.53. You want to scroll down until you get to the 753 CD. It's the second one down there. I'm going to download that from the mirror because it's quicker. Okay, so here is my 7.53.cdr file. Let's go back into SheepShaver. We will add that. We'll add that as another image and we'll tell it it is a CD-ROM. So the computer thinks it's a CD-ROM. Now we will save and quit. Now, unfortunately, with the way SheepShaver is, when you do this, it will just sit here like this. And the only way of getting out of it that I've been able to figure out is to force quit. And so we'll force quit SheepShaver. There we go. And then we will relaunch it. And this time it should boot into System 7.5, as it has done. There we go. Now we just need to go to System Software Installers, install System Software, continue. Okay, make sure we're going to that Mac HD drive, that's good, and we'll go to Custom Install. I want to install for any computer, so I'm going to just do that. Universal system for any Macintosh, there we go. So then we can boot this to lots of different computers, and then we go install. Okay, and that has finished installing. And so what I should be able to do now is go to the SheepShaver preferences and get rid of this CD-ROM so that we're only using our disk image to boot from. Save and quit, shut down, and we'll relaunch it. And there we go, it's happily booting into the disk image that we created. Rebuild the desktop file. Great, excellent, close message, there we go. Now we will shut this down. Right, we're ready to go. So now I've got my disk image there and it is pretty much good to go. It's got a System 7.5 installed on it. Now we can copy that file across onto the BlueSCSI SD card. Keep in mind, of course, it is a 2 GB file, so it will take quite a little while to copy. Okay, now we have to rename this image. Because the BlueSCSI looks for a particular file name for its configuration. So we'll go back here onto the BlueSCSI page for the file naming convention here. Now the file name has to start with capital HD, and then we've got XY. X refers to the SCSI ID, Y refers to the logical unit number ID, and then you have the sector size. So we're going to rename this one. We're going to call it HD. Now, what SCSI ID are we going to use? Well, this is being set up as an external SCSI drive. So we have to keep in mind that if we're connecting it up to a computer that already has an internal drive, that's probably going to be set to 0. So we don't want to set it at 0. And if it's a computer that has a CD-ROM drive in there, that's probably going to be set to ID 3. So we probably don't want 3 either. Typically when I'm setting up an ID to be as flexible as possible, I would usually set it up to probably ID 6 or ID 5 or something like that. I'm going to set this to ID 6. And then logical unit number needs to be set to 0, underscore, and then 512 to show the sector size. Now, from here on in, you can type pretty much anything you want because the BlueSCSI will ignore it. This can just be notes for yourself. So I can go in here and say this is system 7.5.3. There we go. All right. So now we've got a 2 GB image here set to SCSI ID 6. And it's system 7.53, and it should be ready to go. So we're going to inject this now, and we are going to put it in our BlueSCSI, and we're going to test it out. Okay, I have the BlueSCSI connected to this Macintosh SE30. I'm about to switch it on. I will be holding down Shift-Option-Command-Delete to get it to boot from the external rather than the internal drive. Okay, and that looks like we're booting from the BlueSCSI. And there you have it. We've booted up to our little Mac HD here. That is our BlueSCSI drive and our System 7.5 on it, and that's all worked beautifully. A couple of things I'd like to mention quickly. You can have multiple disk images on the SD card. Just make sure that each one has a unique SCSI ID. It's also important to be aware that systems prior to 7.5 have a partition size limit of 2 GB. System 7.5 doubles that to 4 GB. All links from this tutorial are in the description, along with a list of all the equipment I use. If you like this video, please press all the things. I do hope it was of some assistance, and thanks for watching.